I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's Map.
If you succeed tonight, more than one innocent life may be spared.
Expecto Patronum!
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. And today we're going over Chapter 12, the Patronus. Anna's back with us again.
Hello!
And this is another chapter that you requested, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you specifically want to be on this one.
I love Patronuses. I just think they're beautiful.
That's it? Just the chapter title?
Well, and obviously Lupin teaching Harry.
Fair enough.
Anything that involves a lot of Remus J. Lupin, I'm here for.
That's valid. That's super valid. Well, unfortunately, we start off the chapter with a lot of Golden Trio trauma.
Me too.
Drama about trauma is really what it is. Thank you. No, but it centers around the confiscated firebolt. So,
yes.
Hermione, we didn't really talk about it last chapter. She hangs out with McGonagall after the Christmas feast and kind of spills the beans on Harry's firebolt, which McGonagall agrees with her because it's the logical thing to do. I mean, I feel
like the only thing Hermione could have done better is maybe full on tell Harry and Ron her primary concern was that Sirius Black sent it. She never actually tells them that until after she already gets McGonagall involved.
Yeah.
McGonagall needed to be involved. Like, Hermione's right. That's why, like, Harry and Ron are just
I do agree with the panic when in Harry and Ron when McGonagall says the word. I've had issues with McGonagall this entire book.
Have. I get it.
But this is one more time where her word choice is very poor. And she says, strip it down. And they panic. And they're like, what are you doing to this thing? Poor choice of words by McGonagall.
When Harry tells Wood, that's what McGonagall says, he just turns pale.
Yeah.
Which I have issues with Wood's reaction to this drama. Was he really going to kick Harry off of the Quidditch team if Harry could not find ways to basically fight his depression? Is that really what was going to happen, Kate?
That
yeah.
seems
we
like
all know
where...
I love Oliver Wood, but I'm a little...
It was very well written, though, by J.K., in that it didn't explicitly say that.
Yeah.
But it was definitely trending towards that decision being made.
Basically, it's like the entire world's reaction to mental health. Cool.
Yes.
Good job, Oliver.
Yes. Mental health in this series is something else. Yeah.
Golden Trio
Look at you
drama.
being critical of Oliver Wood.
I know, right?
You almost yelled at me for being almost critical of Oliver Wood.
I know. I think that's why it stuck out to me so much. I never thought anything negative about him. And then that happened. I was like, Oliver, I feel so betrayed.
See? I'm not crazy when I think...
I never said you're crazy.
Nah. Anyway, so we have some classes to talk about. I feel like this is have we ever spent more time in classes in the first couple of books? Like, I feel like we're always in a class in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, you were kind of right.
Right? Like, I don't know. It's just something that kind of caught me. Hagrid's class. Cool class.
Very cool class.
He gets it. It looks like he's settled in and he got it. And was like, what can I do that would be kind of cool, but also third year level?
Yeah.
Fire salamanders in the middle of winter, having like a little salamander bonfire.
Don't you just imagine them roasting marshmallows with the
salamanders? 100%.
Yeah, I want to do that.
It's a cool lesson, although it stinks that you have to go out into the snow and the cold for the lesson. But really cool lesson. Good job, Hagrid. Well done. Trelawney, Anna's favorite professor, is teaching palmistry. And the noteworthy thing that happened there is Trelawney noted that Harry has a kind of a short lifeline, which goes towards all of the grim speak from before.
It does.
And if we want, we can talk about that a little bit more.
So you had an interesting spoilery point with that.
I'll talk more about that in spoilers then. But, to be real, the class we all want to spend time in is Professor R.J. Lupin.
Yes, always.
And
I didn't mean to do that.
Just the word always?
Because I always want to be in his class, legitly. So, yeah.
So, It's not even really his classes. It's his
It's like one-on-one class time.
Yeah, it's more of
they're calling them anti-dementor classes.
yeah, they're like after hours lessons where Lupin's teaching Harry how to kind of deal with dementors. And there's a really cool description of the Patronus charm that he gives. I don't know if you have the quote ready.
The Patronus is a kind of positive force, a projection of the very things that the Dementor feeds upon. Hope, happiness, the desire to survive. But it cannot feel despair as real humans can, so the Dementors can't hurt it.
Isn't that a beautifully worded
Yes.
description of a spell?
Don't you just... That's why I love Patronuses. I think they're so beautiful. Like, don't you wish you could have your own kind of... When you're feeling low and blue, as we all sometimes feel, you could just have this positive energy kind of surround you and protect you from those feelings. It's so lovely.
Yeah, no, it's one of the more just well-worded descriptions in this book so far.
Yeah.
It really...
I feel like she put a lot of thought into her descriptions, both the Mentors and the Patronus. Yeah,
I agree. Well, obviously they're so tied together in such an intimate way.
Yeah.
I also just want to point out before we get too far into the whole Dementor and Patronus thing, Lupin, that man is such a great man, because not only is he thoughtful of Harry to even have these lessons, he's considerate of the Boggart that he's using for this lesson. Because he's like, yeah, I just so happened to find this in like Filch's cabinet or whatever. And, I think he's going to be okay with it because I have a really nice space for him, like under the desk or whatever. I'm like, oh, Lupin, look at you. You're so nice. Like,
he is. He's considerate of all creatures.
Like, that's just heartwarming. That's wonderful. Look at you, Lupin. Oh, this is amazing. If you needed like a, what is it? What's the phrasing? If you need like a character validation or something like that.
Well, this is why I feel like he would have been the best therapist for the Wizarding world.
Forget what he does for Harry. How he treats the Boggart here is really key. No. Anyway.
Nice.
It just hopped out of me. I was like, oh, look at you. Anyway, so he describes Patronus' charm in more detail, and he says it's well beyond ordinary wizarding level, which if you don't know what that is now, you will later. So we'll leave that there. But again, just how Lupin kind of handles the whole teaching bit of this.
And that's actually a question I have for you.
Ooh, okay.
I do think... I just think Lupin is an outstanding teacher, and like you said, his thoughtfulness, and I do truly think he's just really trying to help Harry with this situation and Harry's feelings about it. But when it gets to the point, I think after Harry's tried like twice, and he tells Lupin that it's getting worse, that Lily's voice is coming through clearer, and then he hears his dad. And Lupin kind of says, like, maybe we should stop. Maybe this is too much for you. Do you think another teacher would have continued the lessons at that point when Harry was being physically affected, when, these memories were getting worse for him? Would another teacher have said, okay, this is too much for this 13-year-old boy to be reliving this trauma this much? Would somebody who was not James's best friend, understanding of James's son's determination and wanting to win the Quidditch match?
You know what? I'm not even going to go there with it. That aside, not that you're wrong, you're right. But aside from that, I think it's him as a listener and him as a teacher.
And his own experiences, knowing.
Just, I don't really know how to say that. It's like, it's a feeling. Like you hear someone say, like, no, I want to continue. And that's fine. Do you really? I believe Harry saying this with such a conviction.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like it's
but is it actually good for Harry? I mean, we know what happens. We know,
I see that's...
Yes, it's a good thing for him, but like, is it actually good for a teacher to be pushing a 13-year-old?
No, I get your point.
Just because the 13-year-old is convicted?
No, I get your point. It's hard for me to like express it without like without a real hard example. And the only example that I can think of is from my career, which does not translate.
Fair enough.
It's exactly 1-to-1. So it's hard
Sure.
for me to kind of say this appropriately. But it's like, I'll give you my example. If I cut this later, I'll cut it later.
I know. Sorry, guys. I put him on the spot.
So the example that I have from my career, it's a terrible example, so I apologize. But I work in healthcare. And I work with injuries. So if somebody gets injured on the field, you might hear like a scream or a yell, right? And I was working one day, and I had my back to the field because I was doing something else with another athlete. And something happened on the field, and that athlete screamed. And I didn't have to turn around and see what had happened to know that it was serious because of just the sound of it.
Sure.
Like, Lupin probably has taught, he's taught these kids. He knows them pretty well by this point because we're past halfway in the semester.
True.
And he's also had an entire, education himself. He's probably, he grew up with James and Sirius, who are very confident individuals in their own right.
Yes.
And he grew up with he's a Gryffindor, he grew up with a bunch of Gryffindors.
That's what I'm saying. All of these things are influencing him.
Sure, that bravado, that arrogance of like, yeah, I can do it, like whatever. He's probably heard that a billion times.
True.
And I'm assuming, and you might not even know the difference. You might not even know you even would recognize the difference until you hear it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's bravado, that's arrogance, you can't handle this. Or, I think you can handle it. You know what I'm saying?
No, I do.
And it's not something you probably, and that's why I'm having such a hard time to describe it. Mm-hmm. It's not something you know until you know. Like, until you hear it for yourself.
Well, it's also like you said, when you know the individual, like, maybe...
I get your point. You're not wrong. I totally get your point.
Says the same thing that Harry says, but Lupin sees it in her that, like, no, okay, actually, so maybe he doesn't push another child the way he pushes Harry. Who knows? But it was just a thought that popped into my mind.
To answer your question in a non-spoilery way, no, different teachers would handle this differently. McGonagall would shut it down immediately.
Yeah.
McGonagall probably wouldn't even entertain this to begin with.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's a whole other flip to the dynamic completely. Snape would, but differently. Yes. He would, but differently.
Yes.
Which we can talk about in the spoilers.
Yes. Oh, God. I don't even want to go there.
So to answer your question, you're right. Other teachers would handle this differently. There's a lot of different ways you could have handled this. But I guess what my thought was, in that specific interaction, I'm trusting Lupin to make that call at that moment and be like...
And I guess that was my real question of, like, obviously, yes, different teachers would have handled it differently. We're all different human beings. But, like, I guess what I really was, like, just wanted to throw out there, do we think, in the end, Lupin's way of handling it, do we agree with Lupin's way of handling it? Do we think he made the right call? I think he made the right call, but...
I think he made the right call. I think... For a couple of reasons. I think Harry obviously needs to have some semblance of a defense. Mm-hmm. I want to go more into that idea because we've talked about it in previous episodes, but it's more of a spoilery conversation. But Harry does clearly need some level, as basic as it could be or should be or whatever. He needs something, like some barrier, because it affects him much harsher.
He's also very clearly working through some stuff through this whole process. And I think it's easy to recognize it's stuff he needs to work through.
It's a very immersive form of therapy. But,
that's for sure.
But yeah, that's a lot. Did I answer your question?
I don't really know. I don't know if my question really has an answer. So
that's fair. Yeah. Also, to that kind of point about whatever successes he does have coming from this, he does make progress in just this lesson, which Lupin finds astounding.
Yes.
In its own right. And I've had that too. In my limited experience as a teacher, a student will find themselves failing at something and they think it's a failure. And I'm like, no, you were much better this second time than you were just a minute ago. It might not be a finished product. It's not an A, but it's far from a failure.
Well, it's always easier to recognize that as the teacher
Sure.
than the person who's
Right.
doing it.
But his happiness at just the small, littlest thing that Harry's doing and those small successes, again, it's just an indication of who he is and who he is as a teacher.
Well, the fact that he had a gigantic bar, he didn't just have a chocolate frog with him. He then had a gigantic
Yeah.
bar of Honeydew's best chocolate that he made Harry eat the whole thing. So, like, responsible teacher here. Hello.
That's the positives of this. And you've
Yeah,
already
I
somewhat
know.
mentioned the negatives.
I know.
But
I
Harry...
cried.
Yeah, I bet you did. Harry hears James for the first time in these. Which is surprising considering it's not a real Dementor that's drawing out these things in him.
I feel like it speaks a lot to the magic of a Bogart.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. And he hears James and he tells Lupin this.
Poor Lupin.
And we've talked about it before with Harry mentioning Lily. And not just Lily, but what exactly is going on. Lupin, I can't even imagine what he must feel or think in those moments.
Because Harry's finding out for the first time that his dad tried to stop Voldemort to give his mom and him some time. But Lupin's also finding that out for the first time, too. And, like, it's kind of like you're hearing your best friend essentially sacrifice himself for... I mean, it's gonna bring up... Whew.
It's a lot of emotion that I think you kind of said it in the last episode that Lupin hasn't really had a chance to kind of come to grips with James or come to grips with what's happening with Sirius, what happened to Peter, like
his whole world essentially vanished in...
Yeah. And now he's having to, and again, we talk about the magic of Hogwarts, right? It's not just that he's having to relive these moments. He's reliving them in the location that he formed these bonds. Yep. Like, he's being reminded of, like what we talked about, Snape being reminded of, stuff. Mm-hmm. Because he's working at the school.
Right.
And Lupin's the same way. You're like in the...
With the little boy who looks exactly like his friend. So that's the... Whew.
It's a whole mind trip.
Yeah.
That Lupin has to deal with. And he's grounded enough.
Which speaks so... Like, how?
We mentioned it before, just his level of emotional maturity is through the roof. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that, Harry leaves and he just falls apart.
Yeah.
I mean...
I kind of hope he does. Like, I feel like he deserves to cry it out after that.
I'm sure he's had those moments. And I'm sure he tries to kind of put on a stronger persona, like when he's teaching, or try to shrug it off or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, he's going through some stuff. So...
I would also just like to point out, I feel that only a boy would be able to find out in this moment that this teacher, who he feels very close to, was friends like this with his father, who he never knew. He doesn't ask a single question about his dad.
Yeah. No,
that's just my observation. We don't even need to talk about it. I just want to throw out that observation.
No, it strikes...
Like, don't you think both of them just are dying to talk about James? They just move on.
Not maybe in this particular moment, because they're reeling from the emotion of what they just kind of witnessed. But you're not wrong. And Julie said it best when she criticized a harsh word. But she points out that the trio is curious when they want to be, and not curious at other times.
Touche.
And this is an example of
You are right.
Of like, no, you should have probably pressed him a little bit on that. Not even pressed, just be like, oh, can you tell me about something?
Yes, I feel like, how do you not just say, like, can you tell me one thing about him?
That's a prime Julie point right there of like, I feel like
Agree
normally
with you, girl.
you'd be pretty curious right now, and suddenly you're very quiet. Huh? I don't know. But no, obviously that's a big revelation that Lupin admits that he does know James and Sirius personally. If you couldn't get that from the conversation we've already had.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We kind of skipped right over that. But yeah, he does have that admission, which I'm sure Harry won't forget about for too long.
No.
So
Pretty sure he thinks about it a lot when he goes and sits behind the suit of armor after he leaves.
yeah, which that is a dark moment too. When he has this like moment with himself and he's just like, Harry, they're dead.
He's not kind to himself. That is like pounding yourself into something.
You're the Gryffindor expert, Miss, actual member of Gryffindor.
Yeah.
So you can correct me if I'm mistaken on the trait, but when I think of Gryffindor, you can say it's a negative trait. It could, I guess, be spun as positive. But running into something that you know might harm you, this lesson might be an example of like you're literally putting yourself through it. When you know.
And I think you are correct. I think Gryffindor, like, I'm hearing this and I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes you got to do that. So I guess only a Gryffindor could see the merit, and you know, sometimes
you need to take a couple shots.
You gotta suck it up, and if you just gotta do it. Like, I know, like, as a person who feels very strongly about mental health, I don't like the phrase "suck it up."
You do understand that can be an unhealthy trait if done at an often.
People tell me that, you know, yeah, I've been told.
But it just struck me as like. You know, that's a grin and bear it kind of like hard truth. Like, nope, I'm gonna face this head on. Like, no, they're dead. Like, get over it. Suck it up, as you'd say. Like,
well, and I guess that's where when I say he's not very kind to himself, me as a Gryffindor, yes, I see that he needs the Patronus lessons. I see that he's gonna have to hear his parents quite a few times to learn how to make his Patronus. And I see the value in that. I see just gonna have to do this. Sitting in a corner eating chocolate, saying to myself over and over, they're dead. They're dead. I feel like there's maybe kinder ways to find a way through that situation.
Well, and then he ends up facing this problem. He's seen his parents before. This is the first time he's ever really heard his parents. And
I think that's why he's saying to himself, they're dead, because he's
correct.
Trying to tell himself, it's kind of like the Mirror of Erised. He wants to keep going back, even though
if it's possible, it's a more jacked up version.
It's a much more jacked up version, much more. But it's like, okay, yeah, I'm hearing something really awful, but I'm hearing their voice.
Yeah.
And I want it.
Isn't that a weirdly dark? That's like a Black Mirror episode. Do you know what I mean?
Never watched Black Mirror, but I get what you're saying.
It's like this. It's dark, and it's something you shouldn't want, but you then want it, and it's all you can think about, and now it's prohibiting you from potentially gaining what you need.
Right. Yep.
It's a really dark, vicious circle that he's in. And he just came out of the closest thing he's got to a therapy session with Lupin. Who also, by the way, needs therapy. So it's like...
Who's also probably kind of wishing that he could be in Harry's head to maybe hear his friends' voices one more time.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much twisty darkness. But yeah.
And reading it, if you just read it to read it, you'll miss the dark undertones to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dark undertones. It's aggressive.
There's a lot in this book.
And we haven't even gotten to potentially the worst bit of it, which we'll get to in a second. But before, just a small little buffer.
Yes, okay.
We do have, I believe this is the first mention of a new professor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We have, Hermione spends most of this chapter buried in books and homework and all kinds of papers, because she's taking way too many classes.
Yeah. Agree with you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, right. So hear the name Professor Vector, who is
Element does not exist.
the arithmancy professor.
Yes.
So we get that kind of little tidbit of information. Hermione says that arithmancy is actually her favorite class because, of course, it is.
I know. To me, it's just like the hardest possible form of math you could ever get to, and so I'm immediately just like... Ugh.
It fits her vibe because it's very... what's the word?
She needs a book.
She needs a book. She needs her charts. And it's just very... It is what it is.
Yep. It's very logical. There's always going to be one right answer. Yeah,
exactly. Right. So right up her alley. Not a surprise. Okay. Small buffer and done. And now we're going back to the darkness. So we just talked a lot about darkness, but arguably the darkest part of the whole thing is the idea of the dementors' kiss. And shockingly, Lupin and Harry are talking again. And Lupin goes into this description of what it is and why it is, the whole process of it, which is horrifying. And they get into this really interesting philosophical discussion.
Philosophical is totally...
Because Harry is, flying off the handle emotionally, and he's like, oh, that's... I'm paraphrasing. But he's like, that's exactly what Sirius needs, is a dementor's kiss. Like, that is... If he doesn't deserve it, who possibly deserves it? He deserves blah, 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 blah. All that. And Lupin's like... This is like, I keep saying this. Everything he says, I keep saying this. But this is like the epitome of Lupin. I said that literally like 5 minutes ago in this podcast when I was talking about the Bogart. But anyway. This question of just like, well, does anyone actually deserve that fate? Anyone.
Well, and I feel like I keep saying this, but like the emotions that must be roiling in him when he throws out that question in a very calm, like teacher-like manner of like you said, philosophical, does anyone deserve that? Like, how do we feel? How do you think he feels about the fact that like Harry is saying another human being deserves to have their soul sucked out of them?
I believe on the most simplest of levels, and I'll acknowledge that this is the most simplistic of levels, it's the difference between a 13-year-old mentality and a 30-ish-year-old mentality. I forget exactly off the top of my head how old Lupin is at this point, but 33.
I want to say 33.
I also wanted to say 33, so it's good that we're there. Obviously, he has a more mature look because he's lived life.
Yeah.
Where Harry hasn't, and he's just literally flying off the...
And he's got this information about Black is brand new to him.
Right. And he doesn't really have a way to kind of cope, and where does he go with it? What does he do with it?
Yeah.
Where does he put all of this energy? He's choosing anger. Lupin's more of a reflective, like, no, let's think about this. Let's talk about this. Let's work this out. And honestly, he's genuinely curious as to what do you think?
I think he does legitimately want to have a debate about it.
Yeah, he's like, seriously, what do you think about it? And it is an interesting debate because Harry's all wound up with Sirius Black, but Voldy. There are other dark wizards that have done severe things.
Voldemort's Death Eaters.
And you can compare it to things in the real world here, where it's like people have done some awful things in the real world that we are living in 2022. What is the level? Is death an appropriate sentence? That's a debate. Is torture a thing? Because people do it.
People do it.
Is it right? There's obviously rules. There's rules, war and stuff like that you shouldn't. And then there's arguments like, well, this person did X, Y, and Z. He deserves it. What line do we cross where you're not made human anymore by it? And like, what does that take from not only the person that you're doing it to, but what does that take from you if you're allowing that to happen or if you're doing it? There's a whole bunch of moral, philosophical questions that are being had in this real world today that Lupin's kind of playing at here. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting kind of question that he asks. I don't know if I worded any of that well.
No, I think you did. Because, I mean, is there a good way to word it? Because it is just a very complicated question that is going to be very divisive for a lot of people, just like the questions for the real world really are. Like, I think...
There's also motives. Like, do you want like Harry because you want revenge? You want to be vindictive with your, like, punishment of Sirius? Or do you think it's literally just a just punishment based on the crimes he's committed? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, but that's still a very philosophical question. Because,
oh, sure.
Like,
yes.
To me, the
yes.
closest we could get to this sentence would be the death penalty in real Muggle world America, or world. And that's a question right there. Like, is there a crime big enough where the death penalty is warranted? Some people say yes, some people say no. I don't think... Obviously, you're going to have your own right answer. I'm going to have my own right answer. Does any human being capable of having the right answer? I don't know. Some people obviously feel the Dementor's kiss is warranted.
He describes this...
I don't think there is a single living creature
he literally says this is worse
warranted.
than death. Because you're literally left as a hollow husk of yourself, unable to really think, feel, emote in any way. Like, you're just a shell of yourself in your worst state.
I feel like you're just kind of like a mannequin that... Then what, do they continue to sit in Azkaban? I mean, there's nothing left for the Dementors to feed off of, I would assume, since they no longer have a soul. They no longer have who they are. Are they committing crimes anymore? So, like, what is done with a person who has been kissed?
Yeah. It's an interesting question that I think Lupin does genuinely want the answer, and I think he also wants to kind of pump the brakes on Harry a little bit, and he's like, okay, you think that, tell me why.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Which Harry needs.
He needs a check
about that, yeah.
Yeah, he needs a little...
And this is the appropriate time to do it. He's had some time, he's still feeling some type of way.
And it's not Ron or Hermione.
Yeah.
Because it's like... this isn't to say he doesn't respect Ron and Hermione, because obviously he does, but
this
it's
is
a different
adult person.
It's a different level who he respects on a different plane. Having like this kind of conversation with him, who also knew...
I was just going to say, he now knows that this person was friends with his dad.
So it's not like Ron and Hermione who are just like saying, oh, whatever, but you don't know. You don't get it like I do. Well, Lupin does get it like you do. He gets it.
And he's still saying, hey...
Does
anybody really deserve this?
It's a really intriguing conversation. And we hope this conversation has been very intriguing.
If it made any sense to you.
Yes. Let us know your thoughts on everything. We really appreciate it. We should probably set off to the spoiler section.
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back with spoilers. No need for Anna to call me a cockroach today. We've mostly agreed. So, on to the spoiler section.
Hey, Hermione.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
All right, we're back with the spoiler section. We have some things to talk about here. We don't have a ton, but we got a couple of things. So, I guess first of all, we didn't even talk about this at the end of the non-spoiler, but Scabbers murdered?
Oh, R.I.P.
Yeah, oh my gosh. How did that...
I have to admit, I kind of snorted at the visual of Ron dramatically jumping out of the boys' staircase holding a sheet. I know it's not a funny moment because he thinks his beloved pet has died.
You just don't like other people's pets. We've learned this already.
I don't like pets in general. But I have to admit, don't you feel like Hermione... I feel like Hermione does not have a great sense of tact. Like, I feel like I would be a little more apologetic if my pet was trying to kill one of my best friend's pets. But she just keeps getting madder.
You're right. She should have a little bit more of an apologetic tone, which is part of the reason Ron is so, angry. But again, they're 13-year-old kids. They don't understand that how you talk to someone can shape how they then talk to you. Oh. It's amazing. Anyway, so my biggest note was this third year, man, Harry goes through so much.
Yeah.
And we're just over halfway through the book, and he's already gone through the ringer. I mean, you have the whole Dementor thing, the hearing your dead parents thing. You find out your Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher happens to be former best friends with your parents.
Found out your godfather betrayed your parents and is essentially the reason your parents are dead.
Welcome to chapter 12. We still have like half the book to go. Like, forget all the stuff that happens from here on. It's like, this is a lot.
You're also trying to be supportive to one of your closest friends who's about to lose, like, a pet. Not a pet. Buckbeak's not a pet, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I thought you meant Ron and his scabbers
Oh,
for a
that
second.
too. Well, and then two of your best friends are like, you're super angry at your friend over the broomstick. Then your best friends are fighting at each other right as you think you're all about to make up.
Yep, this is some prime Golden Trio drama that we have going on, and
Golden Trio drama is just so dramatic.
you're worried that Wood might kick you off the Quidditch team because you can't handle your Dementors. So there's a whole lot.
Oh, poor Harry.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. You had a note about the Patronus and his.
Well, I was just saying you briefly touched on the fact that this Patronus magic is like above ordinary wizarding level. And that's 2 years above what the magic he would currently be at. And I just kind of had a thought that, like, I feel like Harry's thrust into situations where he has to learn a lot of magic that would be above, like, whatever level he's at.
For sure.
Goblet of Fire will be a perfect example, I feel like.
So that's a big example.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, he does a pretty good job. Like, he ends up being very well known for the fact that he can create this Patronus. Obviously, he makes it through the Triwizard and everything that follows after it. So, like, does he have more inherent magical talent than he is given credit for because Hermione is his best friend? Or do you think he's just kind of like, he is thrust into all of these super dangerous situations and he just has to learn this magic and he knows he has to learn this magic and so he kind of like forces it out of himself?
I'm going to give you the most unsatisfying answer.
Okay.
Both. I don't think you could be the son of Lily and James and not have inherent talent, magical talent.
Right, of course.
But obviously he's thrown into the fire and...
What?
Yeah, and you have to hit the ground running or else you will die.
Yeah.
No, it's a little bit of both. I think he does have some inherent magical talent. Not only that, because, I mean, he also has a Horcrux in him. So theoretically, he has part of Voldy's soul giving him a little boost in more ways than just Parseltongue. There's some inherent magic there.
Yeah.
I don't know to what level, but there's got to be some.
I don't like the idea that affects his abilities, though. Because, I mean, obviously, like, once that part of his soul is out of him, he continues to be a great wizard. I mean, he becomes...
Sure. No, I'm not saying that's everything. I'm just saying it
No.
might contribute in some way, shape, or form.
I just don't like that idea. Just because I don't like Voldemort. I know, obviously, he influences Harry because Parseltongue, hello, but I just...
Yeah, I mean...
It makes me feel icky.
Every one of the other Horcruxes have some little inherent magical boost or bump, and...
In my mind, it's just Parseltongue.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's just me.
Me. But I don't know if that contributes anything to it or not, that you have a little piece of Voldy in you.
That's an interesting thought, for sure.
But like you said, it's not everything. I think him being a Potter helps. And he has a will and a determination to get better.
Yeah.
Which also helps, having that hunger to just be like, no, I want to know that. I want to be better at this. The thing you mentioned, Hermione, the thing that separates those two is Hermione literally has a better head on her shoulders.
True. That's very true.
And I'm not talking about literally the intellectual side of things, although that is a big part of it. It's literally her logic and her reason and her calm
and she's much better at not letting her emotions affect her responses.
100%. So Hermione comes out shining a lot.
Yeah.
Because she performs, but she doesn't even perform necessarily better than Harry performs extraordinarily well when put to the fire many times without Hermione there.
Mm-hmm.
So they perform differently.
Well, that is also
But the outcome seems the same.
Yeah. The thing that I always go back to is the fact that Harry performs a Patronus so much better than Hermione, that Hermione struggles so much performing a Patronus. That fact has always really intrigued me, and I don't even know where I'm going with it in this, because I don't think that says anything about Hermione's magical abilities.
I agree. So there's this trope that people have in like shows where some characters are good at every single thing, and it kind of gets on you after a while, and you're like, how can they fly? How can they do math? Like how can they be good at everything? And Hermione is almost
She can't fly.
good. She can't fly. That's one thing. And you know, there's some bits of magic that she can't exactly wrap her head around. That's a good thing, I think.
Agreed. I think this one specifically always intrigued me about Hermione, because I feel like it just speaks to, I don't know, like, for example, the fact that when Ron made that mean comment all the way back in Sorcerer's Stone, that she burst into tears and spent the day in Myrtle's bathroom, or in the girls' bathroom, crying. She puts up a very good front a lot of times, but she takes a lot in and holds a lot in so that you wouldn't know it. But I think she's not as good at Harry as fighting off the negativity. I think that's why it's always intrigued me that she wasn't that great at creating a Patronus.
This isn't... I'm about to say what I'm about to say. It's not necessarily even true, because Hermione packs a punch when she wants to, obviously. But it's almost like if you're... I wouldn't want to fight either, necessarily, really.
No, definitely not.
But it's almost like a Flitwick Moody, maybe, comparison? I don't know. I was going to say McGonagall, but that doesn't seem right either. Where it's like you have...
Where Moody is Harry?
Yes.
Okay.
Where it's like a power. Like, they're a little bit more aggressive, like, tendency, almost.
Mm.
And Hermione or Flitwick would come at you with a little bit more of a finesse game of, like...
Yeah.
They throw
I
some
get
weird,
what you're
different
saying.
things at you that you might not even know is coming.
I get what you're
Whereas
saying.
they're more like, nope, I'm taking you head on. Let's go head on, and we're just gonna, you know what I mean? That's kind of what I think like.
No, you're right. It's yeah.
Like Flitwick and Hermione would be like, how many different ways can I beat you?
Yeah.
Whereas Moody and Harry would be more of like I'm going to hit you with the best that I got. Here it comes. What are you going to do about it? Don't get me started on that.
I mean, that's literally the essence of your point. He just keeps bringing it over and over and over.
You're right. Moody has a little bit more flavor to him than that. I'll give you that. But you get the,
I do.
the
Yeah,
point.
no, I get exactly what you're saying, and I agree.
So, I don't know where I was going with any of that.
This whole conversation has been kind of a tangent.
No, his knack with the Patronus is interesting. Because there's no way around it. So when they say well beyond that of an owl, how well beyond? Like, are we...
I mean, I always go back to when he's at his hearing in Order to the Phoenix, and Madame Bones brings up the fact that he can create a corporeal Patronus and is shocked by the fact that he's able to do that. I kind of just get the impression, to me, that just brings it back. Like, I don't think this is a very normal thing.
Correct.
That an adult wizard could do this type of magic.
I agree. So I think it's like, it's not just something you learn in schooling. So I think it's beyond Newt level. I would think, like, we talked before on the podcast about, like, extra schooling or extra training.
Yeah.
Like, to become an Auror. You need to go through a little bit extra to get that qualification or that job title or what have you. That would probably be something that you would be tested on. Like, hey, can you do this?
Right.
Something to that level. Like magical law enforcement, when you're going to be coming into contact with dementors.
Right.
Hey, you might need to know how to do this. that level of quote-unquote professional training, where no, not every witch or wizard is going to have that.
Right.
Probably very, very few.
Well, because hopefully very, very few are coming into contact with dementors.
Yeah. So yeah, this would be an extraordinarily rare... I mean, just...
Well, also on top of the fact that in this chapter, the 3 happy memories that Harry comes up with.
Yeah.
A happy memory is a happy memory, and everybody lives their own lives. But I feel like the happy memories that Harry comes up with are very telling of the life that Harry has lived. And we talk about that all the time. So I just feel like that's an added, like, the fact that one of the things that Harry becomes so well known for is his Patronus, I feel like is just such a huge thing, considering he didn't really have anything happy to pull from until the age of 11.
The Patronus idea is not only like, it's like a combination, because as we talked about earlier, it's like that pull of Dementor and Patronus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. You're pulling like happy and negative thoughts, because that's what Harry has here. He's trying to think of something happy.
Like pushing the negative thoughts on him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're trying to think of a happy thought, but you're also thinking of like what will happen with the Dementor. So it's like a push and pull. When we've seen other witches and wizards use Patronuses in the series, they also have gone through some stuff. Obviously Lupin, who we've talked at length about, but like Dumbledore or Aberforth.
Yeah.
Both have the same general issue.
Yeah.
The same literal point in time that they might have to grapple with. That they have to fight with, of like the Dementor or Dementors. Like when Dumbledore blows away hundreds, quote unquote, whatever that was, on the Quidditch pitch.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how strong of a pull that must have been on him, and him being able to outwill that, if you will, or whatever?
How about Ginny? Ginny is eventually able to produce a Patronus, and being touched by Voldemort for as long as she was, the Dementors must have, obviously on the train, affected her huge. Yeah.
Neville. Like,
Neville.
There's so many that you can kind of pull from, and it's an interesting bit of magic.
It is. And
for once, it's a professor not named Flitwick telling us about a charm. I love Flitwick. He's my dude. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to get Lupin kind of filling us in on that. But anything else on the Patronus or Harry or all of that powered nature?
No, I don't think so.
He does learn a lot of advanced magic ahead of the curve.
Does.
He's not perfect at it.
No, he's not, but I mean...
He fails a lot, actually, in doing it, but...
But this is about to turn into a motivational speech, but, like, doesn't that make it better? Like, he never gives up as he keeps failing at it. He just keeps barreling on through till he gets it.
That motivational speech really dipped at the end there.
What can I say? There's a reason I'm not a motivational speaker.
It's interesting because obviously people toward the end are picking at him. And they're like, are you really that talented? Because other people keep stepping in front of you to fight your battles for you.
Yeah.
I
mean, Harry even at some point says that.
So it's like, are you really all that cracked up to be? Or are you just another dude that just so happens to have a scar on his head and you're the focal point? It's an interesting kind of concept that he wrestles with later. And that other people force upon him. But
he proves himself.
He does.
He gets her done.
Really? That's how you want to...
That's how I'm saying
it. Anna, on the podcast. Harry, get her done. And with that, we are going to end the podcast for this.
We got her done!
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. Please let us know your thoughts on Harry being able to get her done. And we will see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.